a single light was off, and nobody realized the plane was already falling. On a quiet December night in 1972, a modern wide-body jet lifted off from New York, heading toward Miami. It was a routine passenger flight during the busy holiday season. Nothing about the departure suggested anything unusual. The aircraft was advanced, the weather along the route was stable, and the crew in command was highly experienced. On board were passengers traveling for holidays, expecting a normal evening journey. In the cockpit sat Captain Robert Loft, a veteran pilot with decades of experience, First Officer Albert Stockstill, and Flight Engineer Donald Repo. Together, they represented thousands of flight hours and deep familiarity with commercial aviation. At 9:20 p.m., Flight 401 departed JFK Airport and climbed smoothly into the night sky. The aircraft leveled off on course toward Florida, cruising steadily through calm air. Inside the cabin, everything felt ordinary. Service continued, passengers relaxed, and the flight progressed without incident. After more than 2 hours in the air, the aircraft began its descent toward Miami. Conditions were ideal for landing. Visibility was excellent, winds were light, and the approach path was clear over the dark expanse of the Florida Everglades. As part of the landing checklist, the crew lowered the landing gear. The system responded normally. 2 green lights appeared on the instrument panel, confirming that the main landing gear was locked and secure. But then something subtle happened. The third indicator light, the one confirming the nose gear position, did not illuminate. It was not red, it was not flashing, it simply remained dark. A small detail, almost easy to ignore, but at only a few miles from landing, even the smallest uncertainty becomes critical. The crew now faced a decision. Was the nose gear actually not locked, or was the indicator bulb itself faulty? There was no immediate way to confirm it visually from the cockpit, and landing without certainty was not an option. The captain made a cautious decision. They would abort the approach, climb back to a safe altitude, and investigate before attempting to land again. Air traffic control cleared Flight 401 to climb to 2,000 feet and hold over the Everglades. The aircraft turned away from the city lights and entered a dark, featureless sky. From here, the plan was simple: identify the issue, then land safely. The crew began troubleshooting. They cycled the landing gear. The result remained unchanged: 2 green lights, 1 dark indicator. They performed a cockpit light test. Every other bulb illuminated normally. The conclusion became more likely: the indicator bulb itself had failed. Still, aviation does not rely on assumptions. It relies on confirmation. The flight engineer was asked to visually inspect the landing gear from a small access area beneath the cockpit. Meanwhile, the captain and first officer focused on removing the indicator bulb from its socket to verify its condition. To ease workload, they engaged the autopilot in altitude hold mode, set to maintain 2,000 feet. The aircraft continued west, flying over the dark and unlit Everglades. At this moment, something subtle occurred. A slight, unnoticed input on the control column shifted the autopilot into a different mode. It did not disconnect completely, and no warning sounded. Instead, it transitioned into a configuration that no longer actively maintained altitude. The aircraft began a slow, almost invisible descent. Inside the cockpit, attention was locked on the faulty indicator light. The crew twisted it, adjusted it, and discussed how to remove it. The focus narrowed further with each passing moment. Outside, there were no city lights, no horizon, no visual reference points, only darkness beneath the aircraft. The altimeter slowly began to change. 1,900 feet, 1,800 feet, 1,700 feet. The descent was gradual but continuous. A subtle altitude alert briefly sounded, indicating deviation from the selected level. But it did not trigger urgency. The focus inside the cockpit remained on the light. Meanwhile, the aircraft continued to descend unnoticed. The first officer observed a slight increase in airspeed. Assuming excess engine thrust, he reduced power slightly. But the speed increase was not caused by power. It was caused by descent. Reducing thrust made the descent steeper. Now the aircraft was descending at over 1,000 feet per minute. Still, no one was fully monitoring the primary flight instruments. Air traffic control noticed a slightly unusual altitude reading on radar, but such fluctuations were not uncommon for early radar systems. A general inquiry was made to the crew about their progress. The response was calm. Everything was under control. They were troubleshooting a minor issue and preparing to return for landing. As the aircraft turned back toward the airport, another factor increased the danger. During a banking turn, part of the lift force is redirected sideways, reducing vertical lift. Without altitude correction, the descent rate increased further, now passing below 1,000 feet. Still unnoticed. Then, finally, the first officer looked at the instruments again. Something was wrong. The altitude was far lower than expected. The aircraft was descending rapidly toward the ground. Immediately, the pilots attempted to recover. The control columns were pulled back. Engines increased power, but the altitude was already critically low and recovery space was almost gone. At 11:42 p.m., Flight 401 impacted the Florida Everglades. The investigation that followed revealed a surprising truth. The landing gear had been fully extended and locked the entire time. There was no mechanical failure preventing a safe landing. The only malfunction was a single burned-out indicator bulb. The aircraft itself had been fully functional. The descent began because of a subtle autopilot mode change that went unnoticed, but the deeper cause was not mechanical. It was human. For several critical minutes, the entire cockpit crew focused their attention on solving a minor technical issue. During that time, no one was actively monitoring altitude with full awareness. No one clearly verbalized altitude checks. The fundamental task of flying the aircraft became secondary. This event led to one of the most important changes in aviation history. Investigators concluded that the crew had become fixated on a single problem. That fixation narrowed their attention and reduced overall situational awareness. As a result, they missed multiple cues that the aircraft was descending. In the years that followed, aviation underwent major changes. Airlines introduced structured cockpit procedures designed to prevent this type of situation from happening again. This system became known as crew resource management. It established clear roles inside the cockpit. One pilot must always remain fully responsible for monitoring the aircraft. Communication must be clear and continuous. Automation modes must be verified and cross-checked. No single task should distract the entire crew from flight safety. Modern aircraft now also include improved warning systems designed to alert pilots when altitude deviations occur. Ground proximity warning systems, clearer altitude alerts, and standardized callouts all trace their roots back to lessons learned from this flight. The legacy of Flight 401 is not defined by a mechanical failure. It is defined by how easily human attention can narrow under pressure. A simple indicator light, a brief distraction, a sequence of small moments that aligned in the wrong way. Today, every commercial flight carries those lessons forward. Because in aviation, safety is not just about machines working correctly. It is about ensuring that attention never leaves the sky. And it all began with a single light that stayed dark.